The Reincarnated family is a renowned family of swordsmen whose members are born with strong physiques and exceptional talent, and who have ruled the world with overwhelming skill. There are 3 words that describe everything about this family: combat, conquests, and control. This is the family where our protagonist, Jim Reincarnated, was born. Jim, the youngest son of the Reincarnated family, chose the branded sword, which is the sword of the founder and symbol of the Reincarnated family, so it was expected that he would become the head of the family. The protagonist thought his future would be full of success and fame, but nothing was further from the truth. Jim had 0 talent in sword handling and was called the shame of the Reincarnated, the disgrace of Reincarnated, and the worst fool of the Reincarnated. However, he trained every day, worked hard, and studied fencing to improve his knowledge, but he couldn't achieve anything. His brothers mock and hit him, claiming it is his own fault, but he doesn't care at all because he believes that by working hard and striving, he can earn the recognition of his family and finally become part of the Reincarnated. But that was not what he truly believed. At 25 years old, he was exiled from the family and began to wander aimlessly. He met a master who taught him that he had talent for magic, which was prohibited in his family. 3 years after that, our protagonist was trying to connect the mana that exists in nature with the mana of the magician to recover the mana. But in that, the protagonist was discovered by a shadow that takes him to a dark space. While there, he hears an entity that introduces itself as Saul Derrick, the master of all shadows. Saul Derrick tells him that if he makes a contract with him, not only will he be able to use the power of the shadows, but he will also be able to negate curses. Saul Derrick says that it seems he was hated when young because he detected that the protagonist is cursed, as his talent was cut by a simple curse known as the Blake illusion, which suppresses talents for fencing. He tells him that it is a terrible curse that cannot exist in the Reincarnated family, and that perhaps that is why he felt attracted to him. Saul Derrick tells him that from now on, no curse will be able to harm him again, and the protagonist accepts. Saul Derrick tells him that he just has to become an extraordinary magical swordsman and leaves, saying that he will have fun observing him. After that, the protagonist picks up his sword and, indeed, every time Jim raises his sword, he is able to reach new heights and feel the sword as if it weighed nothing. The protagonist thinks that the worst fool has ceased to exist. Later, the protagonist is killed while sleeping and calls out to his master, Saul Derrick, but no one can help him. He says he can't believe it will all end this way, and wonders why he was given another opportunity. When he dies, he reappears at the chief's sword selection ceremony. He immediately realizes he has returned to the past, to when he was 1 year old and chose the chief's sword, choosing the chief's sword of the Reincarnated family, and proclaiming that in this life he will make his own choice. The youngest son of the sword master begins. In just a few minutes, the head of the family orders the youngest to be moved to the Storm Castle. 6 years later, we see a grown protagonist who thinks he must stay in the castle until he is 10 and is bored while lost in his thoughts. The servant suddenly enters and tells him that there is a dead bird in his room. The protagonist thinks that the only ones who would do that in the Storm Castle are his brothers. He sees them enter the room and laments that the servant found it there. We see their names for the first time. This is the 11th son of the 3 Reincarnated brothers, and this is the 12th son of the 3 Reincarnated brothers. They begin to mock the protagonist, and when they were going to attack him, Jin beats them and tells them to stay out of his sight as much as possible. A real guard enters and asks what happened. The protagonist tells him that they started fighting and fell down, and he wanted to take them to a doctor, but Jin tells him not to because they have to go to a place. They go outside, where there is a storm, and we see that the protagonist made a tomb for them, saying he killed and buried them next to him. Khan says that the storm will get worse and it wouldn't be a good idea to leave them there, but Jin says it is necessary because they must be aware of what they have done. When the protagonist leaves, we see Khan thinking that this power was not his aura or mana, so he decides he must inform the patriarch as soon as possible and asks for a horse to go immediately. But the protagonist knows that Khan is going to tell his father and says that although Khan is a guardian knight, he is also an observer because it must have seemed like magic to Khan's eyes. But he is sure that Khan would not leave him like that, so the protagonist knows that this is the test of his contract with Saul Derrick, the energy of the shadow that remains valid even in this life. Thanks to it, he has immunity to curses, an advantage of the Saul Derrick contractor, who has managed to avoid the Blade illusion curse. From now on, many things will change with respect to his previous life. He says that what remains is to see how much he can change in this life. The protagonist talks about their previous life and says that the only thing left now is to meet their father. We move on to Khan, who was giving the patriarch news about the protagonist. The patriarch only says to gather the flag bearers and that he will have to see the youngest son. He tells the patriarch that the 7 flag bearers and 200 knights have been gathered. The patriarch says that now we go to the castle of the storm. Here we meet some of the flag bearers, such as Mary Runkendel, the 7th flag bearer, Diffus Runkendel, the 4th flag bearer, and Lunar Runkendel, the 1st flag bearer. We go to the castle where the maid helps change Jin. Jin thinks that Khan must have told everything to his father, but he won't have strictly told him that he was using magic. The protagonist says that their father is coming to check out what this power could be, since it's not magic or aura, and to see if it will be a benefit for the future and prosperity of the clan. When the patriarch arrives, the first thing he does is call the twins, Haytona and Daytona, to ask them what guilt they have in the altercation with their brother, Jin. They agree to say that Jin attacked them and used a strange power that wasn't aura, and they tell him that it looks like magic. They know that magic is forbidden in the family, so they always doubt their father, but their father tells them, "My children, engrave that in your hearts. You won't survive inside the Runkendel families like this. You have to become strong." The patriarch is the strongest, but at the same time the coldest person Jin has ever known. He holds the highest title of the current era, the peak of a demigod knight of Genesis. While once he was no different from ordinary people, after achieving the status of Knight of Genesis, he lost most of his human emotions and became an existence that is only obsessed with the clan and its development. For my father, someone like me, without talent in sword handling, was treated as nobody. But that in this life it will be different, and he will make sure that no one can do without him. He opens the door where his father was. When he enters, he greets his father as Patriarch, and Patriarch asks him why he has called him Patriarch and not father. Jim responds that his brothers, sisters, and the Night Guardians, over 100 members, visited him today and concludes that his visit must be official, and that's why he decided to refer to him that way. The Patriarch tells him that he has visited the castle for a different reason today, so refer to me as father for now. He tells him that he will now ask him the same question he asked his brothers: what guilt did they have in their altercation? He tells the Patriarch that it was revenge, and someone is heard saying that if you are a member of the Runkendel family, you always return what you are given. The Patriarch says that everyone except the youngest leaves the room. It is seen among the guards that the youngest has passed the Patriarch test. The Patriarch asks Jim why he was using a special power, and reminds him that the Runkendel family has prohibited the use of magic because if you use it, you are not able to reach the pinnacle in sword fighting. Jim tells his father that he doesn't know what to call the power or magic and shows it to him, asking if his father can help him name it. The Patriarch recognizes the power as dark energy, similar to the power of the Founder. He tells Jim that this power belongs to Soterer, the god of shadows, who made a contract with the founder of the Runkendel family, Lord Temer, and has been with the family since then. However, since Lord Temer's death, Soterer has not appeared in Runkendel, and the Patriarch does not know why the god is trying to reach out to him through Jim. Patriarch asks from Jim how he plans to use the shadow energy power. Jim tells his father that he wants to use it to help the family. The Patriarch laughs and reminds Jim that he used this power to hit his siblings and throw him into the storm. He tells Jim to be honest with him. Jim thinks that as expected, his father will not let this pass easily and tells him seriously that he wants to use the power for himself. The Patriarch tells Jim that he likes that answer and will be watching him closely from now on. Jim is happy that he was able to overcome this and gain justification for using the shadow energy. But he didn't expect his father to have expectations of him now. He thinks that this is a completely different life from his previous one. After this, Mary gives Jim a gift and tells the servant to boil it well and for Jim to chew it well so that he can get strong quickly. When Jim asks what it is, Marie tells him it is her special soup, made with love. Jin thanks her and she tells him that they are siblings and it is her duty to take care of him. Jin arrives at the castle and sees his sister's gift, which is a phoenix heart. Jin thinks his sister must be crazy for giving that to a 7-year-old. We see a bit more of Mary Runkendel, who is a 6-star knight and the 7th flag bearer of Runkendel, also known as Winifred Fury, who has another name that is not very well known, the Southern Region's Madwoman. The protagonist knows that Mary wants him to become strong and become her opponent. She also says that if he eats the phoenix heart early, he will not only become resistant to fire, but also that it is an elixir that promotes growth. He thinks that if in this life he can really be able to summon a phoenix with his own hands. When the servant Gilly brings him the cooked phoenix heart, the protagonist tells his brothers that they are drooling and that if they want it so much, they will have to do something for him to see it. He says to dig something up. When they finally finish and arrive where the protagonist is, the protagonist, all cracked, tells them that his share is already on the table. They ask why there is only a spoonful. He tells them that he told them he would give them some, but never specifically how much. When Jin arrives, he is surprised that his brothers did the job he asked them to do quite well. He says that with this thickness, he thinks the magic of 1 star should be enough, and that he was already getting quite frustrated because his mana was accumulating with nothing to use it on. He starts breaking down what is left until he arrives at the secret library of Reincarnated. The protagonist has never been able to come here in his life. He feels a bit strange to be there. He remembers a time when his brother told him that in order to open it, he must have to say a trigger word, and he says the son of Reincarnated is here to consult the Murakan. The doors open and the protagonist says that in that place all the secret tomes of the families that have brought from ruin in the last 1,000 years are stored. The protagonist was able to get there because his brother told him in his past life, but that the entrance is only allowed for the flag bearers. But Jim is surprised because he has found something unexpected, someone locked up in a glass jar and they have scales on their body. He concludes that it is the Black Dragon Murakan, who was defeated by the first champion of Reincarnated and then entered a deep sleep. The protagonist always thought that story was not true. He decides to ignore it and continue looking for the secret tomes. When Jean finds Sarah's tomb, he knows he can't take them because there is a danger of getting caught if he did that, so he thinks about copying them every time he comes back there. He starts to copy something, but Murakan surprises him and he gets nervous. But he remembers that Murakan is the guardian of the family, but he never heard that he woke up in his past life. He says that maybe he will let him go if he show respect and acted like a small child. When he calls him guardian, he gets angry and curses Jim for calling him that. After he calms down a bit, he says that he woke up because it had been a long time since he smelled something good, but that there is only one child. Then Murakan approaches the protagonist and asks him why he smells the energy of shadows, that this smell must come from those who are under contract like Temur. The protagonist thinks that the reason maybe Murakan is woke up because of his shadow energy. Murakan starts looking for where this smell comes from, not realizing that the smell comes from the protagonist. The protagonist says he needs to try something and shows Murakan the energy of shadows, saying that his father told him that this power is from the god of shadows, Sol Derek. Murakan says this must be a joke, as the 1,000-year contract promised by Sol Derek is from this child. The Murakan tells Jin that he made a promise with Sol Derek, and it seems that the person who needs to cooperate with him to keep the promise is the protagonist. He told that he will be given the details later, as he has just awoken and can't think properly. But at least he should formally introduce himself to the contractor of Sol Derek. Murakan, while transforming into dragon, introduces himself as a Murakan, the representative of Sol Derek and his friend, and the last descendant of the first being created from shadows. According to the promise, from today on he will be by his side. The protagonist kept him in the library for several weeks. He secretly packed sandwiches and brought them to Murakan, especially the strawberry pie that he likes very much. One day, Murakan asks Jin what he does when he comes here. The protagonist tells him that he transcribes in a diary everything he reads in the books around here. Murakan asks him if he understands those books, and the protagonist tells him that he understands only 30% of them. However, Murakan tells him that it is not bad that he has read those books, but that the protagonist is not as good as the founder of the Reincarnated clan, Temur. The protagonist, feeling a little discouraged, and asks Murakan if he will ever be able to be like Temur. Murakan tries to encourage him, saying that he is a Sol Derek contractor just like Temur and is intelligent enough to read those books. He is still young, and if he trains hard, he will be able to be as strong as Temur, and who knows, he might even surpass him. Murakan tells him that the power of Solderit is infinite, and that the power of Solderit has no limits. So, as a contractor, you also have no limits and should not feel sad because of it. Then Murakan teaches the shadow energy release technique to Jim to make him feel better, and he warns Jim that this technique is incredibly dangerous, so he needs to learn it properly first before using it. The Murakan tells him that the first thing he should do is open his mana, and for that, he needs 2 or 3 years to do it. After that, the protagonist says that it's a lot of time, and then Murakan shows shadow energy immediately to surprise him with a demonstration of what shadow energy releases. The Murakan explains that shadow energy is derived from shadows, and all the shadows in this world were born from Sol Derek. So Sol Derek is the owner of all the shadows in the world, and as the only contractor of Solderit, you can become the owner of all the shadows in the world. Then we see Lady Luna, who has finished clearing an area under her mission, asking the knight what children between the ages of 9 and 10 usually like. We return to the Storm Castle where the twin brothers have turned 10 years old and say goodbye to the protagonist, since they can now leave the castle. The maid congratulates the protagonist on his 9th birthday, but Khan interrupts and tells him that his sister Luna has come to visit him. Let's see more about this first flag bearer of the Reincarnated clan. a 9-star cavalier, the oldest of the 13 Reincarnated siblings, the white whale, Luna Reincarnated. The protagonist thinks that, despite being the strongest of the Reincarnated siblings, she had no interest in becoming the patriarch. Luna gave up on the desire to become a future patriarch and stepped aside in the disgusting battle known as Succession War. She is a lonely white whale who moves alone, so Luna never showed interest in any of the siblings. Due to this, it would be more fitting to describe her relationship with Jin as that of a stranger rather than family. So for the protagonist, this is a surprise. He thinks that for her to be here, something must have happened with the clan. Or maybe they discovered that he has been entering the secret library. Luna asks about his health, but Jim says he is just nervous because it is the first time he has seen Luna so close. Luna apologizes for being thoughtless and asks to speak with him privately, which surprises the protagonist, and he agrees. Once they are alone, Luna says that the main reason she came so suddenly is because when her father visited last time, his demonstration made all the siblings pay attention to him. So at the moment when he leaves the castle, they will all be on guard against him to keep him under control, and she does not want him to get trapped in a fight between family members and lose his happiness. But the protagonist tells her that he does not plan to retire from this fight, and that he has already experienced an attempted assassination. Luna becomes upset at the thought of a siblings trying to kill him in the Storm Castle, and demands to know who it was. But he tells her he cannot say because he honestly does not know, and it is good to know that not all his siblings hate him. Luna hugs him and tells him that it saddens them greatly that he was already involved in a dirty family battle, and the protagonist tells her not to be sad. She changes the subject and tells him it is his birthday and she has a gift for him. She shows him a necklace and tells him to turn around so she can put it on him, and to only break the blue gem of necklace when he is in a situation he cannot handle, and no matter where he is, she will come to get him immediately. After that, they have a little cake and later, she says goodbye to the protagonist because she has to go. Then Jin goes to the secret library where Muraken recognizes the necklace as an object of the Demon King times and that it gives immunity to any magic below 5-star and strengthens the magic skills of the carrier. It also has a function for summoning. Muraken tells Jin that the person who gave him the necklace must have powerful energy and must have felt Muraken's energy as well. This surprises Jin. He thinks that she will tell the clan about Muraken, but Muraken stops him by saying that if Jin truly believes that she would expose her little brother, whom she gave a precious gift, he has nothing to worry about and can trust his sister. On Luna's side, she felt the great power of Muraken, but she says that no matter what Jin becomes or does, she will always support him. Jin Reincarnated was training with Khan, and once he finishes the training, Khan tells him that it has been an honor to instruct him all this time. Since there is not much time left until he leaves the Storm Castle, Khan promises to provide the best training possible until the end. Later, the protagonist was putting his finger in the flames of a candle, and Gilly asks Jin if it is not hot. Jim responds that now he only feels it like hot water. Gilly tells him that they will be leaving the castle early tomorrow and asks Jin to let him know in advance if he needs anything and to pack books separately. Jin says yes and that he will read them on the way. Gilly tells him that he prepared strawberry pie for dessert today and Jin suddenly remembers something. He tells Gilly that he will go out for a walk and then goes to the secret library where Muraken is hiding. Jin reminds Muraken that he will leave the castle tomorrow and asks him how he plans to follow him. Muraken tells Jin that he has been waiting for this moment for a long time and not to worry about small things. He has been asleep for 1,000 years and is not in the best form, but will be able to follow Jin without problems. As Jin becomes stronger, Muraken will also become stronger. Jin remembers that Saul Derek told him that the Reincarnated were once a family of magical swordsmen and Temer, the founder of the Reincarnated family, was the strongest magic swordsman in history. However, not many people know this fact. Muraken says that the reason the current Reincarnated family prohibited magic and chased only the peak of swordsmanship was because of the humiliating oath established 1,000 years ago. The Jin asks him what he will do about the capsule where Muraken is resting, and they will realize if they come to the library and see it empty. He tells him not to worry, that he will use dragon tongue magic to create a duplicate of Muraken as an illusion. He asks if they discover that it is a duplicate, what will happen. Muraken tells him that he is the shadow dragon and that making a double of him is easy, but he has not fully regained his strength, so it won't last too long. However, he will do his best to maintain it as long as possible. After that, the Jin tells him that he brought something special for him, a strawberry cake and wine, which makes Muraken very happy. Jim and the maid were preparing for their trip and 2 guards arrive, introducing themselves as Jerome and Holtz, who will escort them until they reach the Garden of Swords. The journey was going normally until the carriage stopped suddenly and one of the guards said it was an ambush, and asked them to please wait inside the carriage. However, the protagonist asks Gilly to quickly leave the carriage because a Runendel guardian would never leave a Runkendel boy behind under any circumstances. He says that one of the two must have stayed with him, which means they are imposters or traitors. He tells them they need to escape. Gilly then retracts her claws and breaks the side of the carriage, and the maid is escaped with Jim. Shortly afterwards, Jin thinks that the ones attacking might be their allies, since if the ambushers were behind Jin, then at the moment he left the carriage, it would be the best time to kill him. Gilly returns and her doubts are cleared when she sees the leaf emblem and the black beast emblem and recognizes the Yuta clan, a magical clan, and the mercenaries of the Black King squad. They prioritize the life of Jim Runkendel. A man comes to save Jin and introduces himself as Mureka, the vice captain of the 3rd Corporation of the Mercenaries of the Dark King, and tells them that they came to rescue Jin Runkendel at the request of the Runkendel clan. Gilly tells the imposters to reveal their goal, but they mock her, saying they will reveal nothing to a Runkendel dog. The protagonist tells Gilly to kill one and cut off the arm of the other, then bring him to me. Gilly cuts off both arms of the other without much effort, and brings them directly to the protagonist. The intruder tells him that this is just a warning. The region of Runkendel will come to an end, but Jim tells him that instead of the Runkendel era, he wants the era of the Jin Runkendel to begin and orders Gilly to throw it around, as it is not even worth interrogating. The Zippel family, the renowned mage family that rules the other half of this world, is opposed to the Runkendel, who seek the ultimate magic. 1,000 years ago, when the first patriarch of the Runkendel died, the Zippel imposed a humiliating oath on the Runkendel clan to ban magic. As a result, the Runkendel clan had all their magical abilities sealed. As eternal enemies, the Zippel always carry out terrorist attacks against the Great Runkendel. But this attack must be the action of an extremist, as the event today is different from their normal actions. It is perhaps the interference of someone else. The protagonist recognizes Mureka and thanks him, as he was able to escape successfully because of their distraction. Once they get home, he will speak of his actions and they will pay him generously. Mureka approaches his companions and tells them to be careful with their actions and no foolish behavior until they reach the entrance. Mureka tells our protagonist that if they continue walking, they will reach a town in 2 hours where they can rest. In a slightly strange note, Jin tells Gilly that it was not her fault that even the Knight of 9 Stars, Khan, did not notice. It would be harder for you, a 7-star warrior. She apologizes but remains discouraged, so the protagonist thinks that in his previous life, Gilly shared the same fate as him, because as the maid of the Runkendel family, her fate is bound to the child she is in charge of. When he was exiled from the Runkendel family, Gilly was also exiled. However, she never blamed him and said she was sorry for not serving him properly. She lowers her head and apologizes, so Jim thinks that this time it will be different, and she has to become stronger. In a more serious tone, he tells her not to blame herself and that it is an order and not to make him repeat it again. After that, she is seen to have cheered up a little. Later, they arrive at an inn where they ask for 2 rooms. The protagonist is thinking about Buber Gaston and explains that transformation is a privilege of dragons. However, not all dragons can transform perfectly. Buber is the only one who can transform perfectly and use that ability to commit many crimes and bring chaos to the world. The protagonist remembers that in his past life, he was arrested by the Bement Special Forces when he was 20 years old. While thinking this, Jin sleeps, but before falling unconscious, he thinks he should find Buber before he gets into trouble, and who knows, maybe something will be different in his past life. When he wakes up, he sees a cat in the window, and when he lets it into the room, it was none other than Morakan. The protagonist says he was expecting Morakan as one of his servants, like a horseman or something. But he tells him that if he had done that, the knights in Jin's family would have noticed immediately. But because he was annoyed, he stumbled and fell into the window, making a lot of noise which alerted everyone. Gilly immediately entered the room with claws in hand, but she was stopped by Jin. When Murakan finds out that this is Gilly, the one who makes strawberry pie, he goes into romantic mode. Later, Jin was forced to tell her the truth and introduced him as the guardian of Runkendel, the Black Dragon. Gilly apologizes to Murakan for being violent, but he forgives her immediately, as he cannot get angry with her strawberry pie. The next day, they arrived at the Mytal teleport door to enter the Sword Garden. Before entering, Mirka asks Gilly why she chose to leave the McLaurin family and become the maid of Runkendel, but she tells him that it is not important enough to talk about and says goodbye to him. Inside the teleportation door, they show their belonging to the Rukendall family as their identification and are given front row seats. Here, the protagonist recognizes a boy by the golden dragon mark and realizes that he belongs to the Zippel family. The boy sits in front of the protagonist and tries to mock him, but he ignores him. The boy then approaches and introduces himself as Veridin Zippel and apologizes for his rudeness earlier. The protagonist recognizes Veridin as a great magician and the most likely heir of the family, a model for all young magicians. The protagonist does not shake his hand and tells him it is good to know that he is not a complete idiot. Veridin laughs a little, but the protagonist tells him that, even though he was joking, if they had drawn their swords, he would have had the experience of going to Hufester without any bodyguards and might have lost a few fingers. Veridin thinks it's a joke, but gives him advice not to make hasty decisions like cutting someone's fingers off from the Zippel family, as it would be painful for both clans. The protagonist tells him that it's a joke, since his father, Chiron Runkendall, and Veridin's father, Celiac Zippel, would not involve their clans in a simple children's fight. Veridin laughs and tells him he's right, and maybe they'll compensate him with some gold. Veridin tells the protagonist that he has learned something from him in this meeting and he'll pay this debt later when he can. But the protagonist asks him to pay it now. Veridin asks what he needs, and the protagonist says he would appreciate it if he remains silent until the teleportation door activates and doesn't disturb his rest. Veridin agrees and stays watching him, thinking that if it weren't for his clan, he would ask him to be friends. But because of the possibility that he becomes his enemy for life, it would be even cooler. In the end, the teleportation door activates when they were about to be transported. Veridin shouts to the protagonist that it was a pleasure to meet him and that they'll see each other again next time. When our protagonist arrives at the main castle of Runkendall by using the teleportation gate, he meets the second-place housekeeper, Pedro, who welcomes him to the sword garden. The protagonist says that in his previous life, he wanted his sword to be placed in the sword garden after he died, as it's a symbol of dreams and honor for every Runkendall. When the protagonist arrives at the main door, his parents and siblings are waiting for him. Here we meet the mother of Jin Rosa Runkendall, also known as Black Panther. His father asks about the cat and he tells him that he picked it up. His mother asks him what its name is, and the protagonist tells her its name is Butterfly Runkendall. After hearing this, his siblings get mad at him for attaching the surname Runkendall to a simple cat. They are treating the cat like an insignificant beast, not knowing that it's the black dragon, Nurekan. His father asks why he named it Runkendall, and he responds that it's so he can be responsible for it. It may just be a beast, but it is the first life that he collected, so he thought its name should also have some weight. On this, the patriarch says that he understands the weight of the name Runkendall, to which Jin says that he understands it too. If someone insults Butterfly, he will be the one to pay the price. The father tells him that he has a talent for making enemies, and to look at how his siblings are looking at him. But Jin tells him he also has a talent for killing his enemies. The patriarch says they should be worried if they want to try to handle this reckless younger son. After that, 4 years passed and we see a 14-year-old Jin, who has already become a 2-star knight and is a cadet of low rank. During training lunch break, Jin meets Bellup, a cadet of low rank, class 13 years old, and a commoner. In his past life, after falling behind in his training, Bellup was fated to be disqualified as a cadet and banished from the clan. He then became a loyal dog of the Bement Empire and started walking the path of a ruthless assassin. Later, Jin found out that Bellup had become a royal bodyguard and was very surprised. But when he found out that Bellup had committed suicide, he was very saddened. So, Jin will make sure that Bellup is not disqualified and exiled this time, since it is enough to live without luck and die once. They have sword fighting sessions which make up a very large portion of their overall grade, and a good grade is a shortcut to becoming a guardian knight. A low-rank instructor tells Jin that his mother told him that if he defeats 10 upper ranks today, it will be fine for him to go to the intermediate rank training group at the beginning of next year. After that, the instructor says that today each cadet will fight 3 times, switching partners each time, and that the 10 most outstanding winners will face young Master Jin one by one. Once they take out the 10 winners, the instructor tells him to prepare, and this begins. The protagonist says his personal best was 8, so he just needs to beat 2 more people. But the one he has to watch out for the most is Mesa Milcano. Mesa is a Knight Guardian of Runkendall and a basic rank elite who will be placed as a Guardian Knight after passing all the training processes in the future. This is the most important sword fighting test, and the fight begins. Jin notices that Mesa has gotten stronger than before, but not to the extent that he can't defeat her. The main problem is that he has to defeat 8 more people after her, so he decides to win against Mesa by wasting his minimum energy. When Mesa notices that Jin is using only simple attacks and not using all of his techniques, she thinks that Jin is disrespecting her, so she gets angry and tries her full power to defeat Jin. However, in the end, Mesa's wooden sword breaks and she is defeated by Jin. During the fight, one thing that surprises Mesa and that she can't believe is that Jin attacks the same place on her sword each time during all those clashes. Their stamina and power are similar, but she falls behind in accuracy and tenacity. She decides that she will do hard training and will definitely defeat him next time. In the end, the protagonist says that everything is going according to plan because it is difficult to face the 10 apprentices head-on. But his overwhelming victory over Mesa has given him the misunderstanding that they will lose in a head-on fight. In the end, he manages to defeat the 10 superior apprentices. The instructor then congratulates him because he will receive training from a true Rukendel in the intermediate rank group starting next year. The protagonist says he wants to fight one more person and calls Belop and shouts that they will have a sparring match. He tells Belop that he cannot survive in Rukendel in this way, and that he has to show some confidence. Belop approaches with fear, and the protagonist tells him that after fighting with 10 people he is tired, but he is still stronger than him. He says that the reason he wants to fight him is to help him improve. The sparring between Belop and the protagonist begins, and the protagonist tells Belop, who is on the ground, that he wants to fight him and that he could have killed him at that moment. He orders him to get up and says that he will only be merciful once. Belop becomes angry and starts to release aura, surprising everyone, as no one expected this much power from him. The instructor says they need to stop the sparring because someone could be in danger if it continues. However, the protagonist gives the instructor an order to keep what happened here a secret. Belop tells the protagonist he has made a mistake and should have fought him first, and the protagonist tells Belop that if he knows how to use aura, he should not hold back. The second round begins. The protagonist thinks he already knew Belop was strong. Every time the cadets sparred with each other, he figured out his opponent's skills and strategies and matched his opponents before intentionally losing accordingly. The protagonist succeeded in provoking Belop to show his true power. Belop tells him that he stopped because he shouldn't have seen the fight through to the end, and asks if the protagonist enjoys playing with people. The protagonist tells him that he doesn't provoke him like that because it also hurts him, that he doesn't know him but he knows one thing. Caring is a behavior that you can only have when you become strong. He says that Belop is weaker than him and kinder than him, and that's something he likes but that he can't survive in this hell if he is kind. He needs to become stronger so he can protect the kindness for himself and everyone else. He also feels sorry for doing something so harsh. He sees the maids bringing food but he tells him to please go get today's food, and the protagonist tells him that he will bring his food along with his later. We see Khan going to the Patriarch room to report Jin's victory. He tells him what he saw in Jin's sparring matches and his father laughs, thinking his son will continue on the path of a conqueror while caring for the weak. He thinks about giving the protagonist his first mission. Later, we see Jin with his sister Luna looking for a sword. She shows him a big sword, but Jin doesn't think it's suitable for him and she makes a face, telling him it was just a joke. She has a sword that's just right for him. During the sword selection ritual, he chooses Barasada, the founder's sword, but she thinks the one most suitable for him is the brother sword of the Barasada that the first patriarch used, Bradamante. He thanks her because all his brothers would want that sword, but thanks to his sister he was able to obtain it because this sword is suitable for shadow energy use. The protagonist quickly goes to show it to Murakan, and he tells him that he still needs to be able to control it. That Bradamante is not a sword that can be used at will. Until he reaches a spiritual energy of 5 stars, he should only use it as a normal sword. At that point, Gilly arrives and tells him that Instructor Garen is looking for him and has assigned him his first mission, and that he will continue after his rest. When he arrived at where the others were, the instructor explained the mission. He and other beginner-level cadets would be divided into 2 groups and would explore the southern border of the Jin Kingdom. The protagonist thought that this was close to the land of the Beastmen, and that the area marked on the map was close to the territory of the White Wolf tribe. Jin thought that this mission was not a place for beginner-level cadets, and that it would be very difficult for a beginner to defeat a Beastman. It seemed to him that someone had intentionally assigned this mission to him. He thought that maybe this mission was assigned to test him because someone had reported his fight with Belop to the Patriarch. This part begins 3 days later. On the southern border region, our protagonist is on his first mission. The objective of this mission is to search for the successor of the Vil family in the Kingdom of Jin, and they divide into 2 groups. The group of Jins runs into a beastman from the Water Tail tribe, But since they have docile personalities and they avoid predators, it seems the White Wolf tribe is not near them. However, the 2nd Division did not have the same luck. They are soon notified that the 2nd Division has been ambushed by 3 humans. Protagonist quickly heads there with Bellup, but only sees a trail of blood along the way. They find abandoned bandages with blood from their own on the west side, and when they go to the location, they find the ambushers. Jin tells Bellup to close his eyes for 2 seconds and then attack the person on the left. Remember that Jin must hide his magical power, as it is forbidden in Reincarnated. Jin captures one man alive and asks his comrades if they are okay. They tell him they are, but that Mesa was kidnapped. Jin sends them to the campsite to recover and tells the captured one that he has 2 options. 1. Be the only one to die after spilling your affiliation. He belongs to the objectives and the locations of their bases, and only you die. Or 2. Keep his mouth shut and die, along with all affiliates and those related to him. He is a man of his word. The man thinks about it and says to guarantee the life of his family and begins to speak. He tells him that he is part of a revolutionary organization known as Canzello. In Protagonist's previous life, Canzello was a terrorist organization that was active until his death, and the world was in an uproar after they killed the king of Jean and massacred the people. They became known to the world for annihilating and robbing civilians who called themselves a revolutionary organization. But the revolution that Canzello means is that their own king becomes the king of the world. The man tells him that he is in a low rank and does not know much about the plan. There are at least 20 martial artists and 4 magic users of 4 stars, and their group is at the entrance of the land of the Beastmen. The Prota asks him one last question. Why did they take Mesa? He says they were ordered to bring all female cadets alive. The Protagonist, with a face like this, tells him he will keep his promise. Protagonist asks his comrades how long it has been since Mesa was kidnapped. They tell him that it has been about an hour. The Protagonist orders them to return to the main camp and to leave it to him, since after the 2nd Division was ambushed, only Bellup is the strongest among the remaining cadets. They try to persuade the Protagonist to join them, but he tells them no, and that if they oppose him, he will see it as an act of disobedience. He leaves alone because he wants to use 100% of his abilities, including magic, which he cannot use in front of them. As he is walking along the path, he thinks it is not feasible to face the 20 martial artists with 4 stars. His priority is to rescue Mesa, so he will avoid fighting. He uses the ability called Seismic Sense and casts the Wind Pursuit spell and realizes that they went to the plains, which are not far away. He follows their path but is ambushed by 3 enemies. He easily takes out one of them. The magician is confident because none of the Reincarnated clan can use magic. He captures one of them there, and he takes out another. The magician starts attack by using fire magic, but it does not make any effect on Protagonist because of Protagonist is immune to fire, so magician try to use an ice spell. But it was of no use, and Protagonist defeats him. The Protagonist thinks that the enemy is underestimating them because they are beginners. They decide to create a distraction to go and rescue Mesa and use a massive fire spell to burn the place where the enemy is located. The leader of the enemy orders the magicians to extinguish the fire with water spells, and the Protagonist appears from behind and knocks him out, taking some keys from him. The Protagonist has infiltrated the place unnoticed and goes down to a basement, where he finds Mesa and helps her escape. When the Protagonist leaving, he sees that the enemies have been attacked by the Beastmen, and a white wolf beast appears in front of them. Mesa leaves to not be a hindrance, and the Protagonist presents himself to the beast and demands that it tells him its name. A few days before the start of the Gene Kingdom mission, the Protagonist tried to release the shadow energy by awakening their sword, but Murakin stopped the Protagonist and said, "Do you have a death wish or something? You are not skilled enough yet. If you release your sword, you will be consumed by the shadow energy. If you don't want to die from a shadow energy overdose, don't try to awaken your sword again." We return to the present. White Wolf introduces himself as Kujito and explains that he is a warrior of the Truca family. Kujito, the White Wolf beast, tells the Protagonist that they will be their new, most precious prey. The White Wolf tribe is known for being born for battles and massacres, and an average adult White Wolf has the skills of at least a 6-star warrior. The White Wolf tribe is the famous sworn enemy of the Reincarnated family because in the past, the Reincarnated's first patriarch had invited their god, Javier, and killed him, whom the White Wolves used to worship as their god. Protagonist knows that it will be impossible to escape with Mesa because Mesa is barely able to walk due to his injuries. Kujito tells the Protagonist, "Now choose that you will have an honorable fight with me or be destroyed into pieces while you try to run away cowardly." Jin, the protagonist, with his 2 balls, said he will fight honorably, and the beast charges at him, saying that he seems like a Runkandle who knows honor, and the fight begins. The protagonist thinks that Kujito is really from the white tribe because just blocking his attacks is bringing him to their limit. Then, he thinks he has a chance of victory by using the pendant that his sister gave him, but he knows that this is just a small crisis that is not worth using it for. If he can't surpass a danger of this level, then it simply means he doesn't have the qualifications to become strong. He has the option of using magic, but magic is not suitable to use either because it is only 4 stars and therefore it cannot pierce the white wolf's skin. Therefore, with no other choice, he decides to awaken the sword by taking the risk of his life. Then the protagonist released his sword filled with shadow energy and was able to carve a death mark onto the white wolf's chest. Before the protagonist could celebrate his victory, the energy of the shadows began to consume him. He saw the silhouette of a Murakan who told him that when a person with a lack of spiritual energy, like him, awakens the sword, they will have to pay the price. The Murakan ordered him to wake up because it will be the end. If he loses his head, he tries to release the spiritual energy, trying not to be carried away by it. He tries a few times until he succeeds, and after releasing it, he says that the pain disappeared all at once, but he feels stuffed with shadow energy. He realizes that someone is hiding near them, and when he approaches, he sees a guy who tells him not to hurt him. He introduces himself as Semberville, and that he comes from the Ville clan of the Gene Kingdom. This is the same guy they are looking for in this mission, so the objective of the mission is completed. Sember thanks Jin for coming to rescue him. Our protagonist asks him how he was kidnapped by the Canzello group. This guy says that he followed his lover here, who died 2 years ago, but that from her face, her voice, and the 2 moles on her wrist were exactly the same as when she was alive. It may sound like he's a madman, but it's true. Jin thinks that it sounds like the work of Bubert Gaston, the Transformer, and if there is some kind of connection between Bubert and Canzello, it gives him a bad presentiment since this is the 2nd time he has gotten involved with him after he left the Strom Castle at age 10. He thinks that he should have to meet him in person to see what kind of person he is. Sember tells him that thank you for listening to him without thinking he's crazy. Our protagonist tells him that his clan will be sending reinforcements soon, so he should return. In the end, Semberville says that he will remember today's meeting forever, and that he should let him know if he ever needs his help. Jin just says that he will let him know. Illy congratulates Jin for successfully completing his first mission, but Murakan does not seem happy. Jin offers him his hand, but Murakan bites him and he takes it off. Murakan tells Jin that he told him not to release shadow energy because he could die, and that if he found himself in a situation that he couldn't handle, he should have used the pendant his sister gave him. The protagonist tells Murakan that it was a waste and that he doesn't know when he will find a much more powerful enemy. He asks Murakan how he knew that he released the sword. Murakan tells him that he noticed it because his spiritual energy jumped from 3 stars to 4 stars. The protagonist is surprised by this, and Murakan says that out of the 11 people who have released shadow energy, 9 of them have died from it. The protagonist says that he assumes that, of those 2 people, he is one of the survivors, but that the other is the first patriarch, Temer. However, Murakan tells him that the other person is actually him, and that Temer would have died if he had released shadow energy. The protagonist is surprised but says that he doesn't want to experience that pain again. Next, we move on to a conversation between 2 of the protagonist's sisters, Annie and Mayu, who can't believe that Jin has killed someone from the White Wolf tribe with only 3 stars. They are the 9th and 8th flag bearers, respectively. The Tana brothers are also present. Annie asks the twins if they are scared of Jin joining the intermediate class, and at first they say no, but when pressed by their older sisters, they admit that they are scared. The sisters offer to help and say they will lend them their slaves. The intermediate training class at Runkandle follows the law of the jungle. It is explained that this class only has the fittest survive, and is made up of a wide range of cadets with 3 to 5 stars. New cadets are just as good as cadets who have been stuck in the class for around 10 years. Annie and Mu have managed to get a few of these stuck cadets and treated them like slaves. They offer these cadets to the Tana brothers, but warn them that if they can't finish Jin off, they should be prepared for the consequences. We return to the protagonist, who says that since he has successfully completed his first mission, his promotion to the intermediate class is a certainty. He has also reached 4 stars in spiritual energy. In order to properly extract his spiritual energy, He has to become a swordsman with at least 6 stars within 5 years. The 6th star of a swordsman means you are an excellent swordsman, and when you reach the 7th star, you join the ranks of a master swordsman. But this is a mark for a normal person. When you reach the 8th star and beyond, you are considered irregular, and everything changes completely. Out of the 2 billion people on the continent, there are not even 100 who reach 9 or 10 stars, and there is only one person who surpassed that standard, the demigod, the celestial knight Chiron Run-Candle. Jim asks Muraken if he has any advice for him, and Muraken says that he should focus on cultivating his spiritual energy and not worry about becoming a swordsman with 6 stars. Jin makes a promise to surpass the range of Genesis and knows that in the intermediate class, where strength and skill are everything, being soft doesn't work, so he has only one way to dominate the intermediate class: power. Later, his mother calls him to her office. She congratulates him on his great results in his first mission, but then changes the subject and tells him that according to Petro's report, the room that is only allowed for those who can become the future patriarch was rejected by Jin, and she wants to know why. Our protagonist tells her that it could be a great room, but in the end, it's still just a room, and for him, it feels like too much. His mother is satisfied and lets him go. When Jean leaves her office, she says she doesn't know if he is very greedy or lacks any sense of greed, because he should know that once he enters that room, he will be given the support he deserves, but at the same time, he will become the target of all the siblings who didn't get that room. We then see him approach his group and tell them that from tomorrow, they will be part of the intermediate training class. The intermediate class is made up of several factions, and they are all part of the protagonist faction. They will have to endure all kinds of mockery and torment, but not to fear, because he will not let it pass. They will stop once they conquer the intermediate class, so until then, they should group together in groups of at least 3, even outside of training time, and avoid going alone. The next day, they are all gathered, and we see Zed Run-Candle, an elderly gentleman of 8-star knight and younger brother of Chiron Run-Candle. He says that 10 rookies have joined this year and 27 apprentices have dropped out. Rookies can learn rules and regulations from their seniors. He will only teach swordmanship and assess their performance. Any situation or incident must be resolved by themselves, excluding murder. So he advises them to be careful and not to underestimate anyone. So he asks the elders what he always emphasizes. They start yelling that the weak are not needed in Run-Candle. The protagonist starts thinking that these shouts are full of malice, trying to break his will. He looks at the Tona twins and says that the cadet next to them seems to have been a trainee for a long time and doubts they recruited him themselves. He wonders if they are receiving help from sisters Nu and Annie, who they are sure are trying to break the will of the new recruits. The protagonist thinks he should have let them know that they have misunderstood something greatly, and approaches the Tona brothers, draws his weapon, and cuts the arm of the dark-skinned person next to the twins, to the surprise of everyone. Jin orders the others to call for a doctor and asks the name of the person who just had their arm cut. He responds that his name is Kajin. One of the twins draws his sword and challenges Jin for a sword fight. Jin, with a stern face, says that he cannot see that he is talking to Kajin here, but don't worry. He will accept your duel later, so please stay quiet. The other twin says by mistake that he can't believe Jin would act this way after cutting their cadet. Jin smiles and tells them that he only cut him because he had a hint of bloodlust when looking at him, so he slashed him. Jin tells them all his name and that they may point their swords towards him or even launch a surprise attack like he just did. But if they show even the slightest hint of hostility towards him, then he will make them pay. Zed asks Jin if he thinks it is acceptable to act like this in front of him. The protagonist tells Jin that he does believe it is acceptable, and that he not only fought against the Tona brothers, but also against him. Zed takes out his sword and points it at Jin, telling him to explain himself and warning that he might cut off his head right there depending on his response. Jin explains that he chose to use a unique kind of hazing on the cadets except for Jin and that he took it as an attack from him. Zed launches an attack and only cuts a bit of Jin's cheek. Zed tells Jin that if he was unhappy about the hazing of the cadets, he should have drawn his sword against him rather than injuring the cadet. The protagonist tells Zed that if he had the necessary strength, he would have cut him first before Kajin or her brothers. Zed asks Jin if he doesn't value his life much or if he simply trusts too much in the fact that he is the patriarch's son and no one will kill him. The protagonist tells Zed that he cannot just sit by because his opponent is stronger than him. He says that he may lose his life in an instant, but honor is forever. This makes Seth die laughing, and he tells the protagonist that he recognizes him as worthy of living within the Reincarnated family. Seth tells everyone to not forget their identity as sword fanatics like Jin Reincarnated, and that they can disperse for now, as training will start from tomorrow. Later, our protagonist tells his younger brothers to let him give them advice as their younger brother. He tells them that right now, they may be more scared of their older sisters and brothers, but they should not believe that it will always be this way. They should not only focus on what is in front of them, but also think about the future while making their decisions. Later, he tells Gilly that he started a hierarchy war with the Tona twins and thinks his older sister Annie and Mayu are probably helping them. He injured one of the cadets who was with the Tona brothers, and upon investigation, it appears that this cadet belonged to his sister's faction because there is no way that his brothers could have a 5-star knight in their faction. It is an unspoken rule that flagbearers should only fight other flagbearers, and so his sisters are using the Tona brothers to keep him in check. The only other thing his sisters can do is mess with the allocation of his team members or assign him difficult missions, using their authority as flagbearers in an attempt to hurt or kill him. However, they will also assign him a lot of solo missions with high difficulty, in which he will not have anyone watching over him and will be able to use his full strength freely. Later, it is shown that the three of them are told that from now on, they will receive special training at a secret training ground reserved for pureblood Reincarnated family. This secret place is a special right given only to purebloods, but Sed warns them not to expect it to be easy. During training, Sed explains Reincarnated family swordsmanship has no fixed form, as being a Reincarnated means having a blessed bloodline and naturally possessing the physical body and talent needed for the sword, which can easily surpass the imagination of a normal human. During this training, they must hit a ball called the clear rock, which will produce 3 types of sound depending on the strength used to hit it. If they hit it very softly, it will emit a terrible sound, therefore they must have to hit it exactly balanced strength so that it emits a pleasant sound. Sed then shows them what happens if they hit it very hard. The protagonist, using his intuition, predicts that the ball will explode after hitting with more strength and saves his brothers from the clear rock's tremendous explosion. This marks the beginning of their training. Later, we see Luna Candle still investigating to find out who wanted to kill the protagonist when he was a child, but she has been unable to achieve anything. As the training of the 3 brothers progresses, Sed realizes that the protagonist has immense potential, and is annoyed because how can it be that the young man is the most talented, and he thinks that if the protagonist had been born 10 years earlier, he could have grasped the entirety of Reincarnated in his hand. The protagonist has a talent capable of devouring the Reincarnated clan. This part begins a month later at the Intermediate Cadet Training Center. An announcement is made that the intermediate class has received its first missions, and those whose names are called are asked to come forward. The third mission is the Demon Beast Subjugation, in which the targets are orcs. The location is given as the unprotected area of the Reincarnated Authority. This mission is very difficult for newcomers because there are 25 orcs in total, and they tend to move in groups, making it difficult to kill them as a group. Those in charge of this mission are the protagonist's friends Mesa, Bellop, and company. The others can only be surprised, since they are newcomers and already have a mission like this. They mock Mesa, saying that half of them will return dead and that they should prepare the coffins or ask for help from young Master Jin. Mesa tries to maintain calm because she knows they do not yet have the skill to fight against the orcs, and is determined to silence them by returning successfully from the mission, which is the only way to shut their mouths. We move on to the protagonist, who was training with the Tona twins. One of the twins attacks the clear rock with a very strong force, causing an explosion that almost hits the protagonist, but he somehow manages to dodge it. The guilty twin approaches and asks if he is okay, but the protagonist tells them to do this as far away from him as possible. He becomes thoughtful because he just felt a strange sensation and explains that it was like he knew the trajectory of the iron ball particles, which helps him to dodge ball particles. He thinks that this feeling may be due to the training he had with his sister Luna Reincarnated, and he will try to hit the iron ball one more time before he forgets this sensation. But the voice of Sed is heard, saying that they have a mission, and the Tona brothers are told that they have to in an event in the Vermont Empire as a mission. They don't want to go, but they can't refuse it. Sed tells the protagonist that the mission they will assign him is the VIP assassination of one of the lovers of the Mistress of the Ice Palace, Salarios. It is explained that the Ice Palace refers to the huge tower located in the center of the western sea of the continent, and the mistress of the Ice Palace refers to the owner of the tower. The current mistress of the Ice Palace, Talaris Endorma, is nicknamed the Spider of the Abyss and is famous for being endlessly ruthless with those who touch her lovers. The protagonists have to kill the target, called Alcaro Chenderer, who is currently being escorted by the people of the Ice Palace and is staying in the lawless area of Mammoth. The protagonist asks his uncle if it is true that his own family has ordered the assassination of his own son. Seth replies that it seems they did everything to bring him back, but everything failed, so they decided to have him killed instead of letting their family secret out. He asks the protagonist if he thinks he can do this mission, and he confidently tells her that he can handle it. His brothers look a little worried, but Jin draws his sword and tells them that until he returns, they should make a decision. He makes the iron ball emit a beautiful sound and tells them to think about it, if they prefer him with his older sisters. 2 days later, we see the protagonist saying goodbye to his squad. They notice that Jim has dyed his hair, and he tells them it's to avoid being exposed as Runkendall. He tells them that they seem a bit down, and if it's because of the subjugation mission. They said from Jin that they just came to say goodbye, but the protagonist tells him that this won't be the last time they see each other and not to worry because it won't change anything. So they should focus on the mission they were assigned because he will definitely return. The protagonist says goodbye to Gilly and Gilly tells him that Mammoth is a dangerous place and he should be careful. But Jin tells her that he will bring her a gift and see her soon. Then he leaves for his mission. Later in the city of Mammoth, a land where the worst of the criminals gather, we see some criminals drinking in a shop, and when our protagonist arrives, everyone is staring at him. He only asks for water and something light to eat from the shopkeeper. A guy invades his personal space and tells him that he doesn't think he's acting powerful for a newcomer and that he should get on his knees and start licking his shoes. Then our protagonist cuts the throat of this man with his knife and thinks, like the master said, all the crazy humans are gathered here. And if you want to survive here, you have to show courage and skills. After that, he slams the table and says to the shopkeeper, "How long are you going to make me wait?" They all look at him and say that they knew this would happen one of these days. The shopkeeper brings him what he ordered and tells him that it's not poison. The protagonist tells him that he knows poison is banned in this town. The keeper tells him that he knows a lot and asks if he has family here. The protagonist tells him that it is none of his business and puts a gold coin on the counter. The tavern keeper asks if he wants drugs or if he's looking for someone specific, and he says the latter. He asks if there's anyone there by the name of Hister, but the keeper isn't sure. He then asks if he knows a place where he can spend the night, preferably one that is not infested with insects. The keeper tells him about an inn called Moonlight Well on the west side of the city. It is a place where the kings of Mammoth stay, so he won't have to cause a scene there like he did here. When our protagonist arrives at the inn, he thinks Alcaro is the foolish young master who grew up not knowing anything about suffering. He is crazy about entertainment. The only thing he has is a pretty face and his family name, but he is a scumbag who is weak. The reason he is waiting in this city is because he wants to attract the attention of the master of the Ice Palace. And since the keeper offered him the drug of the moment, there is a high chance that he is probably drugged in his room. The protagonist knows that Alcaro has bodyguards, so he decides to assess the situation in the lobby before taking any action. When he enters, he says that this must be his lucky day because he finds his target arguing with his bodyguards. Alcaro wanted drugs, but they were in not letting him have them. In the end, the bodyguards have no choice but to knock him out. The protagonist takes control of the situation and thinks that these bodyguards must be martial artists, at least 6 stars, so killing Alcaro would be easy. But the problem is he needs to find a way to kill him without getting caught by his guards. He thinks about poison but knows that using poison is an unwritten rule of Mammoth, and if he uses it, half of Mammoth would raise their weapons against him. He also can't do it openly because of the guards, so he needs to find a discreet way to kill him. Until he gets an idea, and now he knows how to do it. Outside, we see a group heading towards the Moonlight Inn when suddenly a massive lightning thunderbolt strikes the Moonwell Inn. Just before the lightning strike happened, the protagonist thinks he will terrorize the Moonlight Inn from his room using magic. Once he adds 4-star shadow energy to his magic, he can create a destruction force at the level of a 6-star, and nobody would suspect that a 15-year-old kid could be a 6-star magician who can destroy the whole inn by using magic. To make it look like the attack is coming from outside the inn, he calls the lightning thunderbolt. This connects with the group outside who are approaching the inn. Here, we meet Ceres and Dorma, the captain of the 7 Swords of the Ice Palace and daughter of the master of the Ice Palace. After seeing this, they run to the Moonlight Inn. While doing so, Ceres says that 6 of her men, including her mother's lover, Alcaro, are inside the inn and she doesn't care much about Alcaro, but they have to save her members' lives first. Then, a lightning strike hits near them, and Ceres hopes that everyone will be safe in the inn. Among the rubble, the protagonist appears and thanks to the pendant, he managed to avoid any fatal injuries. Jin wants to know if Alcaro is still alive, and if he is, it would be a good chance to kill him at that moment since the guards of the Ice Palace are injured. But at that moment, Ceres approaches him and is surprised to see someone of his age here in Mammoth. She asks the protagonist, "Are you injured? If not, go outside from here." Meanwhile, one of the guards of the Ice Palace says that all of his men are injured but alive. Ceres says that this is good news and if they are still protecting Alcaro, they should kill him. The protagonist thinks that he no longer needs to worry about finishing off Alcaro since Ceres has come to take care of him, but a problem will occur if she recognizes him, so he hides his face. Shortly after, it is confirmed that Alcaro died in the explosion of the magical attack and they failed to protect him. Ceres says, "Anyway, I came here to deal with him, so it's good news." Raising her sword, she declares that the Ice Palace will now take over the inn, and that those who challenge them will be considered enemies of the Ice Palace. Ceres again approaches the protagonist and tells him, "Why are you still here? Didn't I tell you to get out of here?" But he tells her that he has a leg injury and can't do it. Ceres tells him to pull up his pants and they use a special ointment to heal it while he does it. She says that he is fortunate to have survived, but even more fortunate because she is applying the medicine on his leg. The protagonist asks how he can repay this favor, but Ceres tells him to think of it as a good memory and that occasionally they should bow in the direction of the Ice Palace. Ceres says goodbye to the protagonist and Jin, thinking happily, mission completed. On the other end, Mesa and the other team members of the protagonist fraction have already completed their mission of killing 18 orcs. Mesa says this is a miracle, since orcs normally move in organized groups, but these were moving alone, making them easier to kill. Jin must have the blessing of a god, and that same fortune also follows his faction members. She orders the team to be on alert, and then we realize why the orcs are acting this way. We see Murakan looking from some bushes. It turns out that a few days ago, with his dragon presence, Murakan appeared to the orcs and, with his presence, he intimidated them and forced them to move individually. If any of them go in a group, he would kill them. They begin to disperse. While watching over the kids, Murakan suddenly feels a great presence of someone and knows that this will not disappear on its own. He feels that these kids are only 3 stars, so they cannot feel the unknown presence and creates a dark barrier around Mesa and her company to protect them. The kids notice the barrier and think that the sky has become darker, believing that maybe it's going to rain. However, Murakan appears in front of the presence in dragon form and asks who has released its presence without his permission. After a short time, he realizes that it is not a living being but a giant from the graveyard, and he says that he was sure that Dragon Clan had taken care of them 2,000 years ago and wonders why the giants that guard the graves of the dead gods are here. He then prepares a dark fire dragon breath attack that destroys the giant. Murakan is thinking that this is related to the Zippel family and that within 10 years, Jin would be able to start a fight against the Zippel family. We see Buber Gaston, the Transformer, ask Bishkal, the head of the revolutionary group, who destroyed his work the ancient giant. Bishkal tells him that his work does not matter now that the one who destroyed the giant of the cemetery was the Black Dragon of the Shadows. Gaston asks if the dragons have realized their great plans, but Bishkal tells him that he will send him some useful men for investigation and that he should form a meeting with the Zippel family in the near future. We move on to the protagonist who is being congratulated by Seth because he completed his mission and returned from Mammoth in one piece. After that, he tells them to disperse for now. Then, the cadets were talking about the luck of Jin, since his objective of assassinations was staying in the same inn where an unknown magician attacked the inn on the same day. We see Kajin and her group also discussing that Jin is very lucky, and they have to do something to take revenge from Jin. But he has the pure blood of the Runkendall family, so they can't do anything until they receive a direct order from Annie Runkendall. Jin overhears their conversation and says, "Kajin, your arm is all right." Kajin responds that the medical team said it was easy to reattach it and thanks him for cutting it so cleanly. Kajin then changes the subject, saying that in his eyes, the protagonist receives recognition from everyone after completing a mission through luck. The protagonist states that as a 5-star knight, Kajin's skill is outstanding among the candidates and he may be stronger than the protagonist. He tells Kajin that it seems like a misunderstanding and draws his sword, telling Kajin that he is free to challenge him at any time and to finish it properly with a sword fight. After hearing this, Kajin is surprised and asks the protagonist if he is sure, to which the protagonist replies that there is no reason to go easy on him. The fight starts, and Kajin thinks that as a 5-star cadet, he will easily win the fight and the protagonist will regret his decision. During the fight, Jin feels Kajin's sword attacks are heavy, but they are nothing compared to the people he will fight in the future. Kajin is more experienced and powerful than the protagonist, so as expected, he corners the protagonist during the fight. But as we all know, the Reincarnated family is famous for evolving during fights, and the protagonist suddenly is able to see the trajectory of Kajin's sword attacks and predict his movements. After dodging many attacks from left to right, the protagonist manages to defeat Kajin by using his final move. Kajin thinks he has been deceived as he did not know that the protagonist was a 5-star, and the protagonist tells him that he did not do such a thing. He simply did not know him well enough and he never gets into fights he thinks he will lose. Later, the Tona brothers arrive, surprised that Jin has defeated Kajin. But Jin says it was not much, leaving them even more surprised. Later, we see Annie and Mew scolding Kajin for saying he was destroyed by the youngest one. He says he is truly ashamed of himself. Annie asks him if he had accepted a bribe or gone easy on Jin for being a Reincarnated, but he says no. In addition, she asks, "Are you really telling me that someone who is only 15 years old reached 5 stars in such a short period of time?" Kajin responds that not only did he see it, but the whole training field saw that Jin's aura definitely exceeded a 5-star. But the sisters tell him to forget it. It's their fault for expecting something from someone like him and to just go away. Annie tells her sister that the youngest is showing them his fangs. But Mew responds that not just to them but to the whole family. That in the next mission of the youngest, they will have to mix some of their kids as well to make sure that it will be a place where Jin will return as a corpse. Jin was talking to Jiley, the first patriarch, father, and sister Luna are only 3 people in the whole Reincarnated history who have become a 5-star knight at 15 years old. Since they announced that he had become a 5-star knight at 15 years old, her brothers will start to feel nervous slowly, including her brother Joshua, who has been nominated as the next patriarch when Lunar Reincarnated. Her sister resigned from her position as the first flag bearer. The second flag bearer was raised as a strong candidate to become the next patriarch under the full support of her mother Rosa Reincarnated. But her father wants someone different from Joshua as an heir, except for her sister Luna. Father never has been satisfied with his older brothers, but her sister Luna, who was the only one to win his interest, is not interested in the throne. So, her father decided that she was not fit to lead the family after that. Joshua's position as the new patriarch solidified. However, things changed when the protagonist appeared, and he is certain that his father's order contains 2 things. The first is a trial to see if he will be able to overcome the age difference between his brothers and him, and those who have been nominated as successors. The second is protection. His father does not want him to die by the hands of his brothers before taking the test. This is because Jin is a special case. So, he tells Gilly to prepare because when his father arrives, there will be a banquet and she has to specially watch over Muraken because it will be the end for them if he secretly transforms into a human and mixes in the banquet to the protagonist's room. Among this, the old man arrives in a hurry and tells him that he has been assigned a mission. But that mission is in the Kalin ruins. We see his mother who is angry at his siblings for wanting to send the youngest to the Zippel's territory. When our protagonist arrives, he sees some flag bearers that we had not seen before, such as Runcher Reincarnated, 3rd flag bearer, Ran Reincarnated, 5th flag bearer, and Vigo Reincarnated, 6th flag bearer. His mother asks him if he heard that his next mission is in the Kalin ruins, and he says yes, he heard it. Then she said this mission is cancelled because there is no way that you will go to Kalin. His mother wanted to cancel the mission. Annie and Mew wanted to oppose, but his mother sends them to shut up, telling these bitches that they are only thinking of a way to kill the youngest. They try to justify themselves by saying it is strange for them to try to kill the youngest, and Annie says it's right. Honestly, she doesn't understand why her mother is protecting the youngest son only. On the other hand, both mother and father have been silently encouraging fights between us siblings. In addition, she said here everyone in the family has grown with so much competition since young, even there are so many times when she was sent on rigorous missions where chances of survival are very low. On which mother tells them they are right, competition is necessary no matter the way and what it means, but they have never achieved the feat of becoming a 5-star at the age of 15, leaving them in shock. That the youngest is different from all of you. If you achieve the same accomplishments, then I will protect you too. In other words, they don't deserve his protection. She begins to give punishments to her other children and says they will have self-discipline for the moment, and they will return each one of the prestigious family swords in their possession. They believe it is something extreme and they think, what will the youngest do now? The protagonist speaks and says that he actually likes the mission his sisters have assigned to him, that he understands that it is a dangerous place but he has no intention of backing down in this fight. Rosa tells him that his sisters only want to hurt him and that as they are not allowed to fight him directly, they are abusing their authority. The youngest replies that he knows that if he fought them now he would lose, but he can humiliate them if he completes the mission successfully. His mother tells him that if he goes to the ruins of Colin, it could be fatal. She asks him one last time if he is sure of doing this, and he says yes, adding that there is something he would like to request. He makes a bet with his family, saying that if he manages to return successfully from this mission, they should allow him to have the swords his older brothers are returning. He believes it is the least he can receive as a reward considering the danger of this mission. One of his brothers tells him that if he really wants a sword, he can give him one of the ones he already has, and advises him to give up on this mission, reminding him that he needs to be alive at least until his father returns. He replies by telling his brother that if he truly cared about such a thing, he would have stopped Annie and Mew when they assigned him this mission. They all hear his mother say that if he returns successfully from the mission, she will give him the swords of his older brothers and they can all leave now. Annie and Mew tell our protagonist that if he believes he will be lucky this time too. Our protagonist only tells them that he is not a very lucky person and to see him later. Our protagonist is presented with a group, which is the one he will be on the mission with, and he knows that the three are from Annie's fraction. So he suspects they plan to stab him in the back in some dangerous situation. One of them tells him that they will go over the retrieval mission, which consists of stealing relics from the ruins of Colin, and their objective is to retrieve 4 relics in total. Our protagonist thinks that the ruins of Colin were once a place where a few thousand natives lived in tribes. Currently, the territory belongs to the Zippel territory and is under the jurisdiction of the Phalon Kingdom. Colin was discovered a few hundred years ago by the Zippel family, and when they discovered the ruins, they killed and enslaved the majority of the natives. Even though today it may seem that they respect them more, in reality, they are still slaves. When the protagonist arrives at the ruins of Colin, he realizes that the reason the Zippels were so obsessed with the ruins of Colin, to the point of sacrificing their reputation, is probably because of a hidden mirror-shaped artifact created by the natives. The existence of the mirror is still classified information known only by the high commands of the Zippel family. However, the truth came to light through a brave journalist, in an article written by that journalist. There was a testimony that indicated that the Zippels had committed many atrocities because they were looking for a specific artifact, and the name of the artifact, according to the testimony, was the Fountain of Mana. By just looking at your reflection, you could increase your mana up to 7 stars. The protagonist thinks that 10 years in the future, the Zippels will begin mass-producing magicians. That means that at this moment, they haven't been able to find the mirror yet, and he won't let them this time. They wanted to make a strategy to enter, but the protagonist tells them that they will not attack yet, and they should take a brief rest. They will begin a surprise attack in an hour, and he offers them something to eat when they are ready. While they are eating, they fell asleep and protagonist tells them, "I will be going alone, so enjoy your sleep well." As he leaves, he assumes it is natural for dogs to follow their master's orders. Our protagonist is surprised to find that there are only 2 guards and no one else around. He easily clears his path by defeating the guards. He sees a door that is locked but does not contain any alert magic. When he opens it and looks inside, he sees a bloody protective magic circle and says that it is commonly known as a type of security magic that distinguishes pure blood or lineage. However, in reality, it is more of a magic instrument to distinguish between humans and demons, as well as monsters or people infected by some plague. It is simple to deactivate with human blood. It does not matter whose blood is used, so he takes blood from one of the guards by cutting his hand, to activate it without leaving evidence of his own blood. Our protagonist thinks that the first security spell was easy to deactivate, but something unexpected happens and the seal activates. This can only mean one thing: the blood he used was not from a human, or he used blood from a diseased human. After the spell activates, suddenly 2 monsters appear in front of the protagonist and start to attack him.